Hey, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like live right here on Black Power Media. I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host once again back. Uh, like I said, happy to be here. Welcome to all of those who are here live in the chat. And to those who will see this in the replay later, welcome to you as well. Shout out to Prince Johnson. Shout out to Christopher Kager. Of course, Big Pun himself, David Silberg, is in the building. Buenos dias, Deborah. Buenos dias. And welcome. Good morning, everybody. We're going to be expecting our guest here in just a few minutes. I'm happy to do this. I keep saying I want to, try to develop the schedule where Monday afternoons will be for I Mix What I Like live, especially since, as you saw in the promo on 420. What's up, brother Burton? What's up, Craig? Jadorian, what's up, everybody? Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Randall, good morning. What's happening? But these things keep coming up, and then when we have little gaps in the schedule and little room to build, want to keep doing it. Eventually we might as well, because eventually there won't be room to do this given all the new content we have coming, all the new shows we have coming from the Remix show. We're going to be having contributions from African Esquire, from Burn It Down with Kim Brown, from the Black Myths podcast. So much more is coming. I can't even remember everything. So eventually won't be any room to do this. But when Brother Marco hit me up the other day and said, I'll let him describe it for himself when he gets here. But essentially the point was, the way I took it at least, this is somebody I go back with some years, it was a question of I took it as a polite, comradely, respectful criticism of the discussion that I had a few weeks ago with Noura Erakat, the Palestinian activist and lawyer, and specifically around her criticism of Afro-pessimism, and even more specifically, her comment saying that Palestine was in fact worse than South Africa in terms of apartheid. Something I've already admitted publicly. I regret's too strong a word. It's not that deep. I do wish I would have challenged that and responded in the moment, but I didn't. Reasons usually having to do with deferring to being host and trying to focus on keeping the conversation moving. But that's one of those moments I would have liked to have back. And wanted to just kind of, but Brother Marco wanted to extend the conversation. So he has just showed up. So I will go ahead and introduce him now. And then he is more than capable of explaining his own perspective. And I'm talking about Marco A. Williams, who is, among many other things, an associate director, or the associate director of education and training at the Center for Reconciliation. He is a public scholar, published writer, and an activist with nearly 2 decades of engaged scholarship work in convening diverse learning communities. McWilliams was the founding instructor of the influential Black Studies program DARE, Direct Action for Rights and Equality, where his teaching focused on using Black radical tradition as a point of departure to design strategies for social change. And I want to welcome him to the program now. Brother Marco, it's good to see you again. As always, what's happening? Thanks for joining us.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's as the old preacher once said, it's good to be seen, man. Out it is out here in these streets. Oh, yeah. How you doing, brother?
Oh man, I'm as good as could be expected. And like I was saying before you came on, I'm happy to be able to host these conversations. And when you reached out to me, this was not initially the plan. But I said, you know what? I mean, these are the conversations that I want us to have more publicly. And I'm very, as I keep saying, I'm very Daruba bin Wahad on these issues, that if it's not something about strategy or tactics, all ideas should be debated and discussed publicly. so everybody's clear where everybody stands. And as I was saying, and then please, I'm happy to have you start and clear up what I was, maybe poorly describing. But initially I was saying, I took your email as, again, a brotherly, respectful, comradely criticism of our discussion with Nora Ericott on the issue of Afro-pessimism, and particularly her point that Palestine is worse off than South Africa in relative apartheid conditions. So I appreciate the criticism. I appreciate you reaching out, and I certainly appreciate you being willing to come on and discuss it publicly. So I'll let you lay out any, your comment or question, and feel, get it started however you like, and clean up anything I might have gotten wrong in that description too, by the way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you. I just want to, say, man, it's so wonderful just to be sitting here talking with you. I mean, we've kind of known around and about each other for a long time. I brought you out here to talk a few times, and
right.
You and your politics just have been very influential in my life, man. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be sitting here breaking bread with you.
Honor is mine, man. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I think that my thoughts around that were less of a criticism than they were a critique. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean, I certainly was not taking shots, but also maybe in the spirit of the Ruba bin Wahad, like we in the lab and we working out these ideas. And I thought that I heard, as she was explaining, I thought that I heard something. So maybe I'll say this: the minute that one gets into comparisons with Black conditions anywhere around the world and other people's struggles, I think Afro-pessimism would argue, do not think that there's anything analogous to the Black condition. And there are reasons and histories around that. And I also don't think that there need to be, right? I think other, folks' struggles, and it can sit situationally on their own and in their own space and place. And so, so when and I tried to go back and listen again on the video before we came on today to see at what point, she was saying that, to hear it again. But she had said something about they don't even do that in South Africa, or South Africa wasn't even like that. And I was like,
she was talking about like the drone strike and sort of like the carpet bombing. Sort of like I think it was more like initially at least a comparison to the military technology being used.
Okay, yeah. And so, I mean, okay, that is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't. I'm like, listen, South African apartheid was just a totalizing, like that. They would have used that had they had that technology, right? Like, that, they had other mechanisms for doing that. It's just, if it's a question around solidarity, and I do think that that's at the core of what she was trying to say, we can have that discussion. But we're talking about my peoples, and it was like, yeah, but they didn't even, I'm like, if they had a drone, if they we can't, that runs us down a rabbit trail that I don't think is helpful. Because with the condition of anti-Blackness, that's going to hit a wall, right? The wall being what I think, Afro-pessimism argues is like, look, like the gratuitous Black violence is what animates the rest of the system. And I'm saying this, Brother Ball, in the context of everything that we are seeing in the news that's happening, that's developing, right? Which is not a new story. We know that it's not a new story, but it's like, and
I don't want to be rude, but it's in fact exactly what you're saying. If folks see that I'm texting, it's because Brother Mel Reeves is texting me right now, trying to set up a time to come on to talk about the latest in the Chauvin trial. And then, as he said, especially in the context of Dante Wright. So, folks, if you're here, please stick around. I think we may be in about an hour or so bringing Mel on, which I think would be a perfect way to add to this build, as a matter of fact. But Marco, that's exact. I mean, first of all, I fully agree with where I think you're headed. And if I were able to replay that moment, I would have wanted to say to Norda, and I would should probably just follow up and say to her privately, you know, like, if the goal is solidarity, the approach is, I don't think it's ever. Honestly, I think in the moment it was a clunky, messy, poorly selected word choice. I don't know that, you know, but she did. It is something that I feel like she may believe, and something that should be discussed more in depth. But my point would be, it doesn't matter if that's really what you believe. If the goal is solidarity, that's just not the approach. So it really doesn't even matter if we really could rank oppression, and let's say one group really was worse than another. If you want solidarity with another group, approaching them and saying, you may have it bad, but I have it worse, that's just not going to work, because I think people just reflexively are going to be defensive. And I don't think anybody in the moment that they're suffering should be expected to say, well, you know what, somebody might have it worse. Right. Because it's just not fair. Like just even I just, you know, sometimes I've had an injury, and in that exact moment, I'm like, this is the worst thing in the history of humanity. Nobody has suffered worse than I feel right now. But I think in that moment, it's not legit to think I should have said, well, someone is actually in that moment, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway, so, and if I want somebody to help me, it wouldn't, I don't think it doesn't work to say, hey man, I know you're hurting, but I'm actually hurting worse. So, so anyway, please go ahead. But that's that would have been my first, like, you know.
Yeah, no, I felt that. When I heard that, it just a little flag just dinged off, just an alert popped up in my political mind, and I was like, yeah, we gotta redo. We need a redo on that, and particularly when we're talking about Black and Palestinian solidarity, because I'm like, if there's any two group of folks on the planet Earth that need to be in full solidarity and need to not be doing that, like, is Black and Palestinians. My goodness.
Yeah.
You know,
and again, folks, just by the way, Mel Reeves is going to be here in about an hour to update us on the Chauvin trial and some of the latest happening in Minneapolis. And I don't know if folks have paid attention. I was actually watching. Honestly, I would give them credit if I could remember. I can't remember what channel. I was watching someone's YouTube channel, and if it comes to me, and they were covering some of the protests in the streets out there at what looked like. We'll have to ask Mel, because it looked like, if you're talking about solidarity, it looked like there was some conflict between the interests of Wright's mother and father and the interests of those protesting in the community, and it looked like there was some back and forth and some tension. And Mel Reeves was right there, and I saw him in the video. I was like, that's Mel. So Mel is on hand both in that situation and with the Chauvin trial, because they're obviously right around the corner from each other, and he'll be here in about an hour. This wasn't planned, but it seems perfectly well timed and appropriate, so we'll go ahead and accommodate that. But to your point, Marco, and I'll say this, man, I was watching, now this is a channel I do remember. I do watch this. There's a Syrian cat named Richard Medhurst, who has I think a very good YouTube channel when it comes to coverage of the federal government, and particularly its relationship to the so-called Middle East. And I think he's from Syria. He knows, all the ins and outs. He's very well versed in all of this. His stuff is solid. But I have noticed that when he breaks from that coverage, he will cover something like Julian Assange, but he doesn't cover any of the Black political prisoners or anything like that. And I had reached out to him and said, there's this latest with Mumia. We could, could you, add some of this, discussion to your work? Because he has a pretty good audience and all that. It might help. On air, he said, yeah, I'll think about it. I appreciate that. He read my chat. It was blah, 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 blah. nothing ever came of it. Then the other day, I happened to notice he's talking about Afghanistan, and he pulls up our comrades in Black Alliance for Peace, and talks about the last week day of solidarity that BAP was leading, and pulls up a video of Ajamu Baraka and plays this video from Ajamu talking about why Black people need to be in solidarity with Afghanistan. He shouts out the video and then moves back on to his coverage of Syria. And then in the days since, in the week or so since, has never come to the issues of political prisoners as he promised, or anything related to the Black struggle. So the first thing I thought when I saw his discussion again of Julian Assange, I think this morning or yesterday, was the email I got from you. And I was thinking, this is exactly why I, in the moment with Frank Wilderson in that interview a couple of years ago that Nora was referencing, and why and where I would have liked to respond more to Nora in that moment, because I'm saying, you know, Black people, particularly Black revolutionaries around the world, are constantly expressing solidarity with all of these other struggles. And even when politely asked if you could just talk a little bit about Mumia, honestly, so my reaction was, this is again why this anti-Black question keeps coming up, this Afro-pessimistic question keeps coming up. And I understand I'm coming to understand all of the disagreements and the debates and all the critiques. But for me, this is where I would constantly, why I found myself in agreement with Frank in that moment on the question of Palestinians, and you know, why I understand your criticism of that interview and others. I've heard quite a number, in fact. So anyway, anything you wanted to say to any of that, or to add on to any of that?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that I would just say that I think that you know, I feel like I'm kind of a lot of things, and one of those things is I'm a bit of a old school, like third worldist. You know what I mean? I'm like, we need to like bring back that third world, like revolutionary politics, where there's some like struggles are seen again. It's like traditionally international, and so that we can build solidarity on that base and that foundation. And I see movements and the political conversations happening in movements where they started to like drift from that. And, you know, and that was like a long time ago. So of course there's going to be evolution and change and so on and so forth. But to battle this matrix, man, we're going to need each other in that way, in that format.
Do you mind if I read a portion of your question here that you wrote in the email? Because yes, I think, you know, you start off, you talk about gentle dissension. You said, one, I might contend that by the logic of that argument, if it is the case, Black people are not only a non-juridical people, but if Afro-pessimism is to be consulted, not even people within the ontological framework of the Western formation of the human. And I thought that was very interesting, because Nora was talking about Palestinians as non-juridical people in the eyes of the West, and certainly Israel. But in that moment, I think was missing not only what was happening in South Africa, but that Black people globally, sort of writ large, in every context, even when there's nominal Black leadership, become a non-juridical people. So anyway, that's how I read your question there. And so I just, you know, wanted to invite you to follow up or.
Yeah. So thank you for saying that. And I was anticipating that, you know, you might sort of progressively move through my thoughts in this conversation here. So this point that, and she used this term several times, this idea of the non-juridical people, that is probably the single most thing that just kind of like grabbed my chest. Cause I was like, now, wait a minute. Cause you know, like, I know she does some Black studies, right? And again, I know she can say what she was saying, but I'm like, I know she know Black folks is a non-juridical people here in the United. Man, I'm getting ready to do a Zoom webinar teaching like on that very thing right now. So that like particularly struck me. I'm like, and in the case of Black folks here in the United States, we are non-juridical citizens, right? At the same moment that we are citizens of the nation, we exist still some way, almost like ghosts outside of the protection of the legal parameters. We remember what Malcolm X said. He said, you running around in 1964, 65 talking about we shall overcome, that means the government has failed you. He said that back then. Look at where we at now, Brother Ball. 2021, and we still talking about voter suppression in Georgia. How is that even a conversation for citizens in a country? Not like I could see if we was like undocumented folks, been here for a long time, trying to figure out how to gain some form of legal access and protections in it. We citizens who fought in every military conflict that this country chose to get in, destroying other people, and we still running around trying to gain access to legal, like there's a whole history. I mean, that's part of the way that you trace and track chattel slavery is through the legal apparatus that the nation built, and which defined the relations between the slave and white settler society. And then later on, the Black codes, which marginalized, right, kept Blacks away from civil rights protections, spilling right over into Jim Crow law, and we live literally with this legacy today. And our Constitution is enshrouded in it. So I'm like, Black people now don't trust the legal systems and legal structures because they understand, even if they're not like the scholars like you, and they understand like, nah, you can't trust their systems. That's non-juridical speak. And it's not about like, oh, I don't think like an individual, like, man, there's gonna be no justice, or we're not gonna get justice rated. And when Black folks talk about that, it's like not like they get very we in that conversation. Like we ain't gonna get no, because we know. So yeah, that I was
but I'm even looking at some of the comments in the chat. There's a lot of things that were going on in that conversation and I think are going on in this one. So like, for instance, when Cuento Nuevo raises Nora Ericott's critique of Afro-pessimism was partly based on Greg Thomas's paper Afro Blues, where he criticizes Afro-pessimist reading of Fanon's work. And then you say also that she doesn't adequately present the points of that paper. Can you address Greg Thomas's critique of Frank Wilderson? I have read that paper, though, as I said when I was talking to Nora, first of all, I wasn't prepared to talk about it today. I didn't, wasn't planning on, trying to give a presentation on it. Don't think I'm qualified to anyway, but, and feel free, Cuento, to raise any particular points from that paper that you like. But essentially what I got from it and this is part of the several things that are going on here. So my engagement with Frank Wilderson, I'll just say quickly again, and Afro-pessimism was based was squarely around the book Incognegro and his presentation of movement, politics, and struggle in that book. So I've never really engaged Afro-pessimism as a fully developed theory, or I've never, it's not a fully developed theory. I've never engaged Afro-pessimism fully as a theoretical approach as it's been written about by Wilderson, Sexton, whoever else. So what drew me to Frank's work was, again, his description of political struggle and the militancy and aggression in that work. That's what still draws me particularly to that. There is all of this off the record criticism of the validity of that story. So I at least want to acknowledge that because I hear about it all the time. And then there is this to Nora's point, or the point I was trying to address with her, there is on a much smaller scale, this circulating, several circulating transcripts of interviews that I and my crew, radio crew, Doctors Burroughs and Haight, did with Frank going back almost 10 years ago already. That, to Nora's point, circulate and I think are being used or added on some level to some of the debate or the confusion around it. So what I understood from Thomas's article was that, and as I've said before, Greg is above my league intellectually. Just there, I'll leave it. I'll just say that. I don't know about as an activist, as a principled human being, but certainly as an intellectual, he is out of my league. But what I understood from it, and what I've understood from several other criticisms of Frank's work, and certainly the way others are suggesting others are using Frank's work, which I have not read either, his students or quote unquote disciples or whatever, is that it does not give proper acknowledgement to the ways the Black radical tradition has engaged materialist ideas and activist struggle, and have sought to be in clear internationalist solidarity with other communities, including Arabs and Palestinians. So that there's this idea that people are taking from Frank's work, apparently, that says to them, Black people shouldn't be in solidarity with other groups, and Black people should have no hope in the potential for activist struggle, and therefore shouldn't even engage. That was never my bent. In fact, when I read Incognito, I had a very opposite reaction in terms of engagement in political struggle and even internationalist solidarity. So even in the part that was quoted from the interview by Nora, I was simply saying, yeah, Palestinians, I stand in solidarity and all of that, and with all whoever. But I'm very clear at the end of the day how all of these communities feel about Black people, and that's going to have to be addressed at some point. So, Cuento Nuevo, that's my maybe too long response. Marco, I don't know if there's anything in particular. I don't know if you've ever read any of those critiques of Frank's work, Greg Thomas's in particular.
No, I have not. I'm gonna read those. Yeah.
I mean, Greg is sharp. There's simply no doubt about it. I mean, Greg is easily one of the sharpest intellects on the planet. So to the extent that I understood, I only read it once. So his work often requires for me more than one reading. But to the extent I understood it, that's at least what I and certainly, hey, look, man, if people are reading Frank's or anybody's work and walking away thinking Black people should just not care, shouldn't be involved, shouldn't get in struggle, or shouldn't be in solidarity with other people, I can't agree with that. Anyway, anything to any of that, brother?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree absolutely with that point. And in fact, if folks are reading Frank's work, Afro-pessimism's work, and walking away with that position, I'm gonna vehemently, strongly disagree. Like I'm gonna argue we actually have a bigger problem with that, positionality than actually whatever's being said in the work. I'm like, wait, hold on, what? Because that's not even consistent with the long Black radical tradition. So we went into a whole nother set of problems, if that's the takeaway.
Let me go ahead. No, I was just going to read. I wanted to read some more of your email, but go ahead and finish your thought if I cut you off.
Well, I was just the only other thing I was just going to say here is that part of the turn that I mentioned in the email is that I see, as so far as I think I understand it theoretically, I don't disagree with the fundamentals, right? Of, like, I have Frank's book and I'm that read the right in the first, I think it's the first chapter, he's sort of setting this up, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. And every interview I've ever heard him say, any other thing I've read. But there's a turn. There's something at the end of that with Afro-pessimism that needs to happen. There's a conversation, there's a piece that needs to happen. And it often comes up in the questions in the Q&A sessions when you hear that he gives talks, or when folks are commenting, it is like, what is to, and therefore what is to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my contention is, I don't understand how you can lay out what at many points is a brilliant theoretical concept, right? And then when it's time to talk about, okay, like, so what are your thoughts about, particularly in all the work that he's done, and like, nobody even want to say anything. I'm like, what's that about? Like, and for me, it's at this point, it's like it's a question as much as anything else. Like, so y'all nobody's even know how to engage in a conversation about what we do.
Mm-hmm.
How did you on the front end spend so much time thinking and laying that out, and then on the back end, like, man, we don't know. I don't know the streets. I think one time I heard it said, "Oh, the streets got it." I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But so that,
I'm just thinking, like,
brother.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, I'm just thinking, like I always remember one of my favorite things that I remember Frank saying at a talk I was at years ago was when he said, "I'm not against the police." He said, "I don't hate the police," and then he left that little pregnant pause, and everybody was like, "Word." And then he said, no, that's not what he said. I messed it up. He said, "I don't hate police brutality." And everybody was like, "What? Word?" And then he said, "I hate the police." And I was just like, I just thought that was like, to me, that summarized in one statement the entire approach. Like, I'm not interested in talking about instances of racism or structural this and impacts of that. This whole thing got to go. And whatever brings that about faster, the better. Now, again, I think Ricky has pointed out somewhere in the comments that there's become a mainstreaming and a liberalizing or a softening of that of an interpretation of Frank's work, and that absolutely has to be addressed. And I actually had no idea that was going on until more or less recently. And admittedly, I still have not read Frank's latest book. I have not, caught up with almost with every single thing, but anyway. Anyway, I don't know, Marco. I don't know what happened to you. I don't know if you just needed a break or something. If you just if something broke or something, or if we
no, I'm here. I'm here.
All right, okay, just making sure. But the other thing that you were saying, your second point in the email was that you said, quote, "There's a corner that I believe Afro-pessimism needs to begin turning. Indeed, it probably already should have, and I'm not sure if it's willing or able to do so. That it does not seem to be creating a kind of seems to be creating a kind of tension or something I'm not fully able to describe yet that will need to be resolved or much more clearly enunciated as a theoretical analysis rather than a prescriptive assertion. My point is that one cannot say that the world is functionally broken insofar as the non-human condition of Black people is concerned, that this brokenness is mediated by a kind of essential anti-Black gratuitous violence played out on the ontological landscape of Black peopleness by the white settler colonial world. And yet somehow Afro-pessimism or Afro-pessimists haven't at least thought of a way to articulate what to do about that. And I think that's what you were just talking about there a little bit, that there's something insufficient, if I understand your point, in Afro-pessimists' response. And that is sort of where I feel like this room, this is the space into which, as Ricky has pointed out, I think as Nora was trying to point out to me, as many have actually been pointing out to me behind the scenes, as there's this apparent, public connection with me to Frank, or me in support of Frank at least, that says, you know, Jared, you've been missing how this is playing out, you know, beyond your interviews with Frank, which is, and there are a lot of people out here who are not getting answers, who are worse, suggesting a kind of non-engagement policy of some sorts in terms of Black people in struggle. So, and I think, by the way, that was one of, to Cuento Nuevo's question, one of Thomas's points about Fanon, that when Fanon and Césaire are talking about the world as it exists needs to be destroyed, they're not suggesting a sort of disassociation from that process by Black people, that Black people need to be engaged in the struggle that will bring about an end to the world. You know, anyway.
Yeah, no, so, and I appreciate the comments. I can't see them, but I see you putting them up in some of the comments in the thread.
Oh, you can't see them? Oh, I'll put more of them up.
But when you flashed it, I see the ones that you flashed, but I don't, and I mean, I don't know if I need to see them, and that's fine.
Okay.
And here's what I would say to you and to folks like you, Brother Ball, when you know, when y'all are able to have Frank and some of these, you know, I mean, we'll say Frank on and to talk to him. I think now that the conversation needs to shift from less about what, you know, explain Afro-pessimism, like what it is, right? And more about pressing him in these interviews, in these conversations, to be like, okay, so, and what are we doing with this? What do you think? What do y'all think we're doing? You see what I'm saying? Not, and I don't say that in the sense that we're looking for him to thus give us the answer, right? Like the cheat code to the game and say, okay, we got it now. We got our marching orders. But to press the theory to transform or to connect it some way to what the praxis would be. Because if they can't have that conversation, if they don't know how to have that conversation, now I'm worried. Particularly connected to what you said with, you know, with the disciples and the, you know, the discipling, because I've seen those kind of energies too, and I repel and reject any and all of that. Anytime I see it, because that's that cult building. We can never do that. And so, yeah, I don't. You see what I'm saying? It's like, because I don't have that power, but like you have the power in the platform and the microphone. Where you know what I'm saying? You can get Frank on and be like, all right, brother, now we're gonna talk about some praxis.
Yeah, you know, it's fun. I mean, I appreciate you saying that, and sometimes
he did that in South Africa. His South Africa story is all about praxis,
right? So that was how I took it. But look, there's a lot of and I know Frank is aware of this, and at some point we've even raised it privately. But you know, there's all this criticism. So, but there's a lot going on. And there's so much stuff happening behind the scenes and off the record. All this critique of whether or not that story is true. There's a lot of criticism that people, you know, and
I've heard that too. I've heard
a lot of people. I mean, it's out there all the time. I mean, his own sister has been critical of the way he's written about his story. You know, there's all this other stuff that's out there that you know, she's been public about that. You know, and then what I was going to make a joke about, there's sometimes an assumption that and I appreciate it, but that you know, especially like with people like Daruba or something, like I can just call them whenever I want and they can come on, like they just come on. Like Frank, I've invited Frank a number of times. Frank is busy. Frank is doing other stuff. We'll see. I don't know. So I mean, you know, but yeah, anyway. But again, my thing is, A, if the story of South Africa is not true, I think people need to have some evidence about it. And B, my thing is and I somewhat hate to admit this, but on some level, I don't care if it's not true, because the perspective in that story, the myth it produces, is a myth that I want. I mean, that's a story I want. That's so if we're just going to rephrase or rebrand the memoir as fiction, then I'll take it. I mean, then I'm good with that too, because I would, and maybe, and if he can't document or doesn't want to prove that it's true, then maybe he should have just called it fiction and would have just been better. Because that's a story I would want to support and produce and share, and that's, if we're going to talk about being inspired by a media product, as people often say when they want to justify seeing movies that I think are dangerous to us psychologically, this would be my version of that. But I say all that to say there's also all of this criticism. There's also just personal stuff and related to the behavior of his students or people that claim his analysis. I don't know. I can only deal with what I've read or what's on the record or what I'm around to see. So anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, I've seen, on the student and what have you, I feel like I've seen some of those energies in conversations and dialogues, and I found myself like, okay, I don't they don't seem to be able to have that conversation around praxis either, right? Like they just totally dove into this thing, and that becomes a problem for me.
So I think I will say I do disagree with. I ask you about this, Marco. I don't, Brother Silberg. I don't know if I agree with this. I've seen some of what is being discussed in the chat that the scholars that bring a critique should also have a prescription. And if they can't, then as you're saying here, we enter into the realm of intellectual masturbation. And I don't know if I agree with that part. I on some level, I think a scholar or an intellectual or anyone's role is to bring certain critique and criticism and questions. I don't think that they have to have an answer or a solution, and I don't know that we should want that to come from them.
Absolutely.
I want the solutions to come from organized political struggle that has a clarity of ideology and political education and all that. That's where I want the answers to come. I think scholars can offer suggestions, make arguments, of course, obviously, but I'm more interested in just getting the data and the information and the analysis. The prescriptions, I think, shouldn't come from them. And many of the prescriptions that we need to adhere to can't be written about by a scholar if they expect to get published. Mm-hmm. So it would be a catch-22 rather, that the analysis we would need to read would never get published. So I think we need to leave scholarship at the level of non-prescriptive research and analysis or offering, maybe not analysis, but data that can provide the basis of an analysis for an activist organized group of or movement to build on. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because here, and I think I agree with the heart of what is Stillman's comment was saying. There's a binary, okay, that begins to form with this idea of the scholar, the theorist, in the praxis, right? The organizer, the person on the streets, the person in the revolutionary struggle. And there's a binary and there's a line there, and I'm always uncomfortable with this from the standpoint that the theorist, the scholar, needs to be in the street, in the community, doing the organizing, and the folks in the organizing. Why are we making this assumption that they're not reading, that they're not writing, that they're not scholars and intellectuals? And that didn't always, you know this, brother, but that didn't always used to be the case. I think this is a relatively recent development of the modernization of Black politics, right? Like, it's like you and I, like for you and I, Fred Hampton is all of that.
Mm-hmm. So check this out. Let me offer up a contradiction. Let me contradict myself and give a perfect example of a contradiction to my last point. So a
Okay.
couple years ago, I'm at the second of the great Harlem debates on whether or not Obama is good for Black people, right? And one of the panelists was Dr. Gerald Horne. And he get up there and essentially said, we can't know how bad or not Obama's going to be because, and he gave some example from Chinese history, and essentially the point was, we won't know his impact until we get to see a broader breadth of history. So at this point, he was saying we can't really we can't prescribe or predict what impact Obama will have or whether he'll be good or bad for Black people. And at the time, and honestly to this day, I have hated that response. And I remember sitting literally behind him on the behind the podium where he was standing, thinking, you are a genius intellect and historian who has written about everything related to Black radical struggle for hundreds of years, right? How can you not know? Because I was sitting there saying, I know he's going to be bad for Black people. I think the historical, I think history tells us, if we look at history and if we're paying attention to what's happening now, Obama's going to be bad for Black people. How could you not know? And how could you not be standing up there offering a radical prescription as a solution to the problem? So I immediately, as I offered up one position, I see where I've even in my own lifetime have felt the very opposite, because I do think, and certainly did in that moment, that there needs to be some sort of, in other words, how could the scholarship not lead to some sort of engaged prescriptive? So I don't know.
That's fascinating. That's so fascinating. And I want to ask you, why do you think that happens? Because as you said, I don't know anybody that's written more widely than Gerald Horne. Like, this dude got
the only thing I can think of. But the only thing I can think of is that, honestly, in there, look, I like I said about Greg Thomas, certainly Gerald Horne is in this. I acknowledge that there are people whose intellect is stronger than mine. So, and I understand, and I recognize that there are people who can see things that, at least in the moment, I don't see. So that would have to be where, that would be the, unless I'm correct, it may just be that his accuracy is in one of my blind spots and I don't see it, because this was certainly before Obama's 2 terms, and I was right, then, and looking back now, I was right. He was horrible for not just Black people, but for the whole planet. But then again, so the only thing I can think of is that there is maybe a genius that I couldn't access. It, maybe Horne is just wrong. He could possibly have just been wrong. It could also be that I have felt this even in my own research, that when you research a certain area to a certain extent, it sometimes can be more difficult than others might think it would be to reach a very concrete, clear, succinct conclusion. So maybe, that was one of those moments for him. I don't know, but I was just sharing that example as a sort of a contradiction for me, because in terms of what we're talking about here, because if I'm saying on the one hand, maybe we shouldn't look for scholars to do anything other than offer us up the data that others can use to put an analysis together, I also was sitting there saying, how could you, Dr. Horne, not have, maybe he was being polite. I don't know if he was trying to, just not upset the Black audience that he was talking to in that church in Harlem that day. That could also be part of it. I felt that moment, on a lesser scale too. You're like, damn, do I really want to say what I think in front of this beautiful, innocent group of lovely people? Right. I don't know. And that was a difficult moment. I mean, people don't always remember that those months before Obama got elected were contentious, and people in the Black debate was strong. I mean, so a lot of people who are now looking back saying, oh yeah, we knew Obama was good. No. It was a lot of people saying, don't you say anything bad about my Barack.
Man,
anyway,
back to my mouth.
Don't you? Anyway,
Right.
I don't know, man. Go ahead. I don't know if there's more I don't know if anything you wanted to add or say, or if there's something I didn't lead you to. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I
I'm
mean,
not
that
really
was,
asking a question at this point.
no, that was, I mean, it was good. I appreciate you having me on. Like I said, yeah, I wanted to, this stuff after that interview, when I watched the episode with Nura, that was all just kind of burning inside of me. And I was like, man, I want to talk about this. So I was like, why don't I just email Jared and to have this conversation? Because in this moment, man, we need to be doing the best political work, the best theorizing work, the best organizing work that I think we can do. I don't know, I work with, over my career, work with young folks a lot. And I'm always, looking at young folks and they're growing up and the technology is advancing. And I see the incredible, amazing work that they do with social media, and their minds are just open. And I'm like, man, we can't, I don't want to see us politically lose another generation. This capitalist machine, this patriarchal dominating machine keeps advancing, and we have to be sophisticated. We got to move with love. We got to move with solidarity. And yeah, so that's,
hey, real quick, Marco, you being asked a direct question here. Is it true that you've argued, haven't you argued that we should continue to vote for the Democratic Party candidates until we have a better party?
No,
it's a little bit off topic, but is that something
No, I don't. I haven't made that argument anywhere. If anyone has can cite a source, I'll be.
You certainly haven't. You certainly never said that to me, and you've never. That's not an argument that's, I don't think, ever been made on this platform. So yeah, I don't know where, but
I promise you, that's a misinterpretation of something somebody may have heard me say somewhere.
Okay.
And again, if there's a source, I'm more than happy to clarify. But no, that's far too simplistic to anything I would argue.
Yeah. I wouldn't. That sounded unfamiliar to me. But certainly. Anyway, there was something about a broken down car analogy that we should hold our nose voting for Democrats. I don't remember you saying anything like that.
This person may be referring to is I have said things along the lines of, we have to use all of the democratic space available, all the pieces on the board, as in an effort to move us further towards liberation. See, voting and moving politically is, again, part of radical Black tradition. Like, you know anything about Fannie Lou Hamer, right? And the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, like, this has all been a part of the process. We see actually here in Rhode Island some of the earliest attempts at Black suffrage in the nation. So I may have been talking about that in the context of that, but the notion that I'm saying, yeah, let's all run out and vote for the Democratic Party, I promise you that in fact, that hadn't ever been my argument, even when I wasn't thinking in these political ways. So
yeah, no, right on. I appreciate you. And certainly, well, actually, then this is sort of going to the point we were just talking at, you have certainly not interpreted the Afro-pessimist argument to mean a disengagement from activist struggle. So, yeah. I actually think thought at the time, maybe I need to revisit this. I actually thought at the time that the argument would be the Afro-pessimist approach could be something that if the broader internationalist struggle was interested in, as it should be, could learn a lot in terms of its own struggles with anti-Blackness in their own communities, which I know is rampant worldwide. And might inform in a positive way some of that engagement with struggle and offer more attempts at being in solidarity with Black people here and around the world. But apparently that's not what's been going on, as has been reported, at least, to me in some circles, around here. So anyway, but hey man, I appreciate you, man. I always appreciate you reaching out, and I'm glad you did, and I'm always happy to build with you and to use this space to do it. I mean, for me, this is one of my, one of the ideal ways to use this space. So
yeah, no, I appreciate you, brother. I love you, brother. And you are so necessary. Your work is so necessary. And what you're doing, Black Power Media, is, man, we can't survive without y'all right now. We just can't do it. So we appreciate y'all, man. Love y'all.
Hey, thank you, man. Anytime, just hit us up and we can do some more, man. But thank you very much. And hey, as we always say, we know you're willing to fight for it. So as Fred Hampton says, we can say peace to you, Marco.
You're willing to fight for
that's it. And we'll catch you next time, man. Appreciate you coming through, man. Thanks again.
Right on.
All right, peace. All right, everybody. Thanks again to Brother Marco for that. We are waiting here just a minute for Mel Reeves, who's going to come on and give us this update from the struggles in Minneapolis around police violence, the Chauvin trial, and the Dante Wright situation. There was one update, if I can just pull it back up here real quick. And if I can, I'm going to double check about how public this is, but we just put up a video at Black Power Media from our conversation yesterday with Bob Boyle, the really legendary lawyer currently of Mumia and many other political prisoners. Please check out that video. And it looks like there's going to be a birthday celebration for him that is being hosted by Daruba bin Wahad. So once I confirm how public that is, we'll share it here. But shout out to Daruba, of course, and to Bob Boyle. And please do check out that video from yesterday where he's talking about his career, as is Kalanji Changa. And then you can also check out the extended video we did which also includes Dr. Johanna Fernandez and Sophia Williams of the Movement from Mumia. One of those formations, forgive me, but check that out. All right, joining us now, hey man, he's back again, Brother Mel Reeves, fresh off of all of the coverage of what's happening out in Minneapolis around Chauvin and of course Dante Wright. And Mel, I was saying before you got here, man, first of all, I appreciate you hitting me up and coming back, but I happened to be, I can't remember what I was looking at, but somebody's YouTube channel was covering the recent protests around Dante Wright, and there was a video of some protesters and his parents trying to calm them, and there seemed to be some distance, at least, between what Wright's parents wanted from the crowd and what the crowd wanted in terms of a response. And then I'm sitting there watching the video, and who's standing right behind Wright's mother, trying to be a positive influence on the situation is Brother Mel Reeves. I said I know that. I know that guy. So this is perfect timing, man. So I don't know if you want to start there or not, but I'd be very interested to know what if I was interpreting that scene correctly, and what was going on with the protests around Dante Wright's killing, but also what his parents were calling for, and what is just the latest on that situation in general.
Oh, I've lost my voice some time. I really lost it yesterday, but it's a little better, just a tad better. I keep working on it with a little tea and honey and lemon. Yeah, it's a little better. Keep talking, it'll get better. Excuse me. Right. So anyway, yeah, that situation was right after that was the afternoon after Dante Wright had been killed. And the police kind of they made it into a deal. They came down with that equipment on, and with their sticks and what have you, and because people are gathered in the community. The Brooklyn Center is about 60% Black, and so folks would come out because they heard Dante Wright got shot, and so they gathered down the street it was a pretty peaceful gathering, and what seemed to actually kind of turn it up a notch was about 15, 16 cops kind of marched down and to where the police tape was. And, it was a provocation, and I don't know what they're thinking, but, well, you do know what they're thinking. They want to let you know that they're boss all the time. So it was a bad move. And so young people were upset. You got to remember, we're here in the background of Derek Chauvin going to trial. This is where George Floyd was murdered. So, people were at the point, and there's some deep feeling about what happened and how he died, in the sense that, could have been prevented, that runs through people's minds on some level. So people are upset. There's a lot of angst about that, and all that stuff. And so now you kill another person. So, some of the young people were really, really upset, to the point where, they were doing some things that borders on, okay, we're not thinking this through. So we had gotten there. I just come from a protest. You can't make this up. My friend Tashira Garraway, and you probably, if you watch the videos and stuff coming out of here, you've heard her name now. She's organized a group called Family Supporting Families Against Police Violence, and they have done excellent work keeping the memories and keeping the fight going for their loved ones. Her loved one her fiance was killed over 10 years ago by St. Paul police. He was brutally beaten and thrown in a trash compactor. And the cops tried to act like, oh, we just found him in a trash compactor. Unfortunately, somebody had actually seen a little what the police said the day before, had chased him and, caught up to him and beat him to death. And so she's still trying to get justice in that case. And she's got lots of other cases, lots of other families who've lost loved ones, in the Twin Cities there and Minnesota in general. And it's a pretty large group, man. I bet if you organize one there, I know some folks in Baltimore. Tawanda Jones's brother, I can't think of his first name. Young West was murdered. Think of I was just talking to Latoya. I can't think of her last name, but her brother was Anti-Black. So you got a lot of folks there in Baltimore and Maryland. In fact, they've kind of gathered all over the country. Families are gathering and fighting to reopen the cases, primarily of their loved one. They're fighting for other families to reopen the cases. So that's really big here. And I think I told you before we were on the show before, we talked about that a little, I think. When we talked about the Mother's March, right? Yeah. So she had a protest at the anniversary of her fiance, Justin Tigan. And that protest, not just, protest, you call it protest, anniversary altogether, celebration of life on some level, was being held. It started at 2:00. The police killed Dante Wright at 1:47 that afternoon. Yeah. So we were at a protest commemorating and fighting to reopen the case of Justin Tigan, and they killed somebody in another part of town. We were in St. Paul. We marched through St. Paul in the area where he was killed on that day, and we left the protest. Somebody said something about, hey, they killed somebody in Brooklyn Center. I think we were there for a good hour, an hour and a half, and we left that protest to go to Brooklyn Center. And so we got there around, someone's got there around 4. And the crowd had been gathering. So that's what you ran into. Instead, I talked to the mother, was able to talk to the mother, get a story of what happened. We printed it, and, we talked about, she told us what happened from what she heard, because he called his mother when he got pulled over. And he told her, because they had told him that they had pulled him over for air fresheners in the rearview mirror. Turns out they had pulled him over because he had expired tabs. Let me tell you the story about that. Everybody's got expired tabs because of the COVID thing. Bureaucracy is on real slow. So it's really not a good reason to be pulling people over, even pre-COVID. And that's one of the issues that has to be raised. Why are the police pulling us over for broken tail? I mean, they just got to stop. It says something to the society. One of the sisters from the NAACP, Angela Myers, did a really good job of pointing out how, this is all about exploiting us. They're pulling us over so they can put more money in their coffers. He pointed out how, the traffic stops are nothing but, a chance for them to rob us. It's extortion. That's all it is. And that's why they pull more folks over in our community. So we have less and we wind up paying more. And that's and the traffic stops are unnecessary anyway. you turn something, a civil matter or somebody not having what they need in order to, drive permissibly, turns into a police matter. There's something seriously wrong with that. So
it's also, I noticed it was been reported on commercial media repeatedly that, without context or detail, that Dante Wright, at one point they were attempting to realize that he had outstanding warrants that led to an escalation of the incident. But there's been a lot of confusion around that as well. And even at one point it was reported that whatever warrants were response to accumulated fines for traffic violations. It wasn't as if he was I don't know. Anyway, is there
misdemeanor? Yeah, he had misdemeanor.
And a misdemeanor around with a gun.
Yes.
Didn't he? Mm-hmm.
But they had knocked it down to just a misdemeanor, whatever it was. He,
But the point was, it wasn't that they were searching for some known so-called violent criminal armed to the teeth, ready to go to war soon. But it was just some silly, it was, anyway.
But that's not why they pulled him over. Even worse than that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. No, I'm saying at the point that he was pulled over, the reporting I'm saying is claiming that once they saw that he had warrants, and then when when you just leave it out there like that without context or explanation, it just obviously makes it easier for primarily white, but also many black people in the audience to say, well, he was doing something illegal, so well.
No, I think actually the George Floyd case and other cases have actually pushed past that. I think few people are saying that now. The only folks that are saying that are people who are in complete denial about what's going on in the society and who have a tendency to want to blame the victim, and the black people who are saying that in the community. We have a name for them. So. You know what I'm saying? If you're still saying it at this point, then something may just be wrong with you. You may not have all the human stuff that most of us have that allow you to have compassion and empathy for other human beings. How about that?
The opposite of drapetomania that we
talked about. We'll leave it at that. They may not have all the tools in order to sympathize with fellow human beings. You know what I do with some conservative oriented folks sometimes, especially white folks act like I said, let me ask you something. So, they'd argue me down about something. I said, you have a point. I will agree with you if you are willing to tell me that you are okay with your daughter having robbed the candy store and the police blowing her brains out. Now, if you tell me you're okay with that, then you have a point. I'll leave you alone. Then that means you're really serious what you're saying. But 99.99%, if they have any honesty in them, have to say, well, no, I guess I wouldn't be okay with that. You see what I'm saying? So that kills that foolishness. If you're okay with your son and your daughter being pulled over and somebody killing them, then I got no debate with you. Then you're serious. Then you really are standing on that position. But if you think that it's not okay for your kid, your relative, your mom, your dad to be treated like that, then you got to stop messing around. Stop playing with me. Stop playing. It's wrong. Stop pretending like you don't know it's wrong. That means that your racism is outshining or outweighing your ability to feel for other human beings. So, that's what that boils down to.
I just wanted to quickly shout out your publication for not continuing to publish the rookie photo of this killer cop or former cop and using some updated photography in your publication's work. I had no other point in bringing that up, so I just wanted to shout out the Minnesota spokesman recorder for that. And because it seems that there still is this proliferation of her old photo. And despite I know what you're saying about the George Floyd trial pushing us to a new, as societally to a new level, but there still seems to be an attempt, at least, to go back to these old tropes of white innocence, and whoops, like whoops, I picked up the wrong weapon, and whoops, I pulled the trigger, and all of that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. We've witnessed, I've seen it. We witnessed cases where they didn't necessarily kill anybody, but they beat people pretty good. And they were yelling, "Stop resisting." You remember that? Mm-hmm. You've heard them do that, right? Mm-hmm. So her yelling taser, could very well have been. Now, I don't know why you would just want to kill her. I don't want to be getting into her head. I don't know why you would want to just shoot somebody. I don't know. And I don't want to speculate because I'd like to give people the benefit of the doubt and say, well, you just wouldn't want to shoot somebody, but I don't know. Based on the history of these people who are armed, and it ain't just white folks, as we know, there have been some brown folks and some black folks that have pulled pistols on black people and killed them. I don't know what's going through their mind. And I don't.
The military brother the other day, wasn't it a Latino that pulled a gun on him? Gutierrez was his name. I thought anyway.
No, the guy in the truck was Latino, Afro-Latino. The dude pulled.
No, the one in the truck was a brother. I'm saying that the cop that pulled the gun on him, I thought was a Latino.
He might have been, and like I say, that's why.
To your point, that's what I'm saying.
Yes. So anyway, nobody trusts that. It was an accident. It could have been, but and it's very smart that she put that out there. So right away, rather than looking at it like the Noor case. In fact, I saw the Star Tribune. I didn't get a chance to read it, but they were comparing her case to the Noor case, where he shot this woman, and they charged him with third-degree murder. And to this day, we still don't know why he shot her. He said he was startled or whatever, but there's no explanation. So the cases are similar. There's no real explanation beside the one that they're giving. It's like me doing something wrong, and I say, "Oh, oops, I made a mistake." And you decide, "Oh, well, I'm going to take your word there was a mistake, and that's how I'm going to deal with it going forward." But we know that's not how the system deals with us. Some kids shoot somebody and says, "Oh, I didn't mean to shoot him." You know what I'm saying? That's not going to stand up. That's not going to have no effect on the charges. They still going to charge them first degree, second, or third degree murder. And so very smoothly, they have they've propagandized folks a little bit. The chief has propagandized folks because if it had just showed the video, we'd have heard her say Taser was like, all right, she shot him. But the chief has propagandized folks by saying, it's my understanding she meant to grab her Taser. But, we know this happened before, right? Oscar Grant, the defense that the cop gave for killing Oscar Grant was that he was reaching for a Taser. And, they're still fighting that case. And I want to stress that, part of the way we're going to win this thing, we're going to overcome this eventually, is we got to keep fighting. And we got to keep fighting with the people who've been most affected. All over the country, we have, it's thousands, y'all. It's into the thousands, maybe over 10,000. It's a large number. I mean, it's actually probably in 10,000 when you think about the family members who were left behind as a result of these murders, right? And so, these folks are hurting. Some of them actually are traumatized, but they're still fighting. I got a lot of respect for them. And that's why we organize around them all the time, because they are the moral force. They've lost their family. You can't tell them nothing. They're moral authority. They're proof. They're living proof of the murder of how murderous the U.S. police force is, right? Yeah, that's the Sherry Garrett right there.
And I was going to say, I was going to ask you to keep going, because this you just published yesterday, and wanted you to certainly elaborate. But I didn't mean to cut you off. Keep going. Sorry.
No, and so I'm talking about how important it is to bring families together, because I didn't get into this last time. Well, we should get into this a little bit. So part of the reason things get off, you see, like the whole Black Lives Matter controversy is going on, is because they're not centering the fight in where it belongs, right? With the people who are most affected, right? They're not necessarily activists, but they know that their kid, their brother, their son, their mother, their dad, their cousin, their uncle was murdered and was done wrongfully, right? So, and they got sense enough to know that a wrong was done to us, and we want to fight back. And so it's smart to fight with them, because you can't say, what are you going to say to them, right? You can't put them down. You can't, say, well, they've got this or that going. No, they've lost their relative, right? So they have a right to fight. They're fighting back, and they're fighting back out of their hurt, out of the sense of justice. They want justice. And we have to embrace them. And when we do this, it keeps us from getting off with all this foolishness, these groups that pop up, right, and start putting money in their own pockets. I just saw the other day that Black Lives Matter folks had collected $90 million or whatever. And I'm not here trying to just criticize folks. I'm just trying to make a point that money, and I've heard a family member to say that money should have been redistributed among all the families that have lost a loved one to police violence. Everybody should have got a stipend of some sort, because those are the people, right? Because on some level, when you think about it, they're raising money on the backs of those families, right? And the only reason that the money came about was because people lost their lives. And so anyway, so we try to center the fight here, and I was talking about this before, in the fight behind the family. We try to work with the families, stand with them, and we've demanded and standing with the families because the case time has moved on. That's why we demand that they reopen all the cases. That our demands have always been reopen the cases because they've tried to sweep them under the rug. And we're saying, no, we're not going to let you sweep them under the rug. And also by reminding folks that we've got to reopen these cases, it helps people who don't understand that this is a systemic problem. You realize, oh, this has been going back. You lost your relative 13 years ago, or yours 15 years ago, 20 years, 25, 30. This has been going on a long time. Yes, it has. Then people can put this into context. And it sounds like a unrealistic demand. But remember, on the tail of the civil rights movement, raised so much hell that the government felt the pressure to go back and reopen those cases. Remember, they reopened the cases of the more of those murders, right, Jerry? Remember, they reopened the cases.
Yeah.
And so it's
not like Goodwin. Yeah.
Right.
Like Goodwin, Trimmer, and Cheney, and all.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not unrealistic, and so that's what we've been demanding, that they go back and reopen those cases. And so we can force them to reopen those cases. We can put even more pressure on them, right? Which will save some of us that are walking now, right? We can even put more pressure on the system and make the cops realize that there are going to be some consequences, right? And then we can from that fight, we can fight to hold them accountable. Because where I'm coming from ultimately is, and one of our other demands is that we end the system of policing as we know it. Folks are talking about defund and that kind of thing. Well, you take $10 from, out of the $100 budget, they still got $90 to do the dirt. You know what I'm saying? So ultimately, we know you can see it now. Everybody's away. Police can't be reformed, though we're down for whatever reforms that will help more and more Black people and other people to live and breathe. I'm down for whatever they implement that will help folks, to be able to stay on this earth. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to end this system of policing as we know it. Whatever that might mean, it's going to have to happen.
Mel, did you say, I don't know if McYagermeister is responding to this. I thought I was hearing you make a point similar to something I heard from Dhoruba bin Wahad a couple years ago, which I thought was relevant even to the video that I saw yesterday that I thought was just happening, but you said happened. You were saying the protest that I was seeing was early, actually the day of Wright's killing.
Yes, that's so.
But what I thought I heard in that video was just this issue here that I know that's something Dhoruba has talked about as well, where the idea that responses and spokespeople in response to these incidents should come from organizations and activists, organized people already organized to be addressing these issues and not be led by victims' families. Because they are grieving, they are not themselves spokespeople of organizations or communities. They are, obviously victims and suffering. But so anyway, is that what? But that was the conflict I thought I saw happening in the streets, where Dante's parents are saying, please calm down. But the people, particularly one sister, was saying, basically almost seeming to be calling back to the mother to say, no, we're supporting you, we're here with you, but we need to move on this.
So let me answer.
Sure.
So I'm glad they raised that. I hope I don't forget anything here. So there's no conflict going on that. So that Sunday, there were some people who were, for lack of a better description, were looking to commit suicide. And so, because they jumped on the car in front of fully armed police and jumped up and down. They brought a brick and smashed it out. And so one of the kids did get shot with a rubber bullet in him in his neck. These people are savages, and I'm not going to just allow them to just shoot me. You know what I'm saying? In that situation, looking to shoot somebody, looking to hurt somebody. And my thing is, but we should not, if you want to do something, you got to do it intelligently. So what was going on was that the police were standing in the phalanx, and they had two lines of phalanx. And so we were trying, because after somebody first gets, you want to bring attention to the case, because the mass media is pretty smart. In fact, they did come out with it. And the headline said violence, dude, the first thing they should have said was police killed Dante Wright. That's all it needs, like in our paper. Police killed Dante. They murdered Dante Wright. That's the story. And you don't want to take away from that story at that point. Yeah, yes, we're angry, we're upset. Like I said, you have never, ever seen an army take the field and just show its chest, right? With against another army loaded for bear. You've never seen one walk across the field and meet that army without a single weapon. You've not seen it happen, right? You've not seen a war conducted, but one side decides, I'm mad, and I'm just gonna run up against your guns. You've not seen that. That is a charge of the Light Brigade. So we initially want to get out the word that they murdered our brother. And so the mass media would like to say, oh, like they did. And because they made it up because there wasn't a whole lot that went down. They want to put it on us. Remember this? They want to tell a story like they want to bury the story. Oh, well, he got killed. Violence, the people were violent. Oh, yeah, like I got killed. No. The cops killed our brother, and we want to send that message first. I don't have any problem. We don't have any problem with people fighting back. Whatever way they want to fight back, they can do that, as far as I'm concerned, right? But one of the things that happened out there was we were trying to organize a protest so we can pretty much tell people what's going on, so we could, we can fight. We can begin to, because that's what got George Floyd. We can say whatever we want. People say, well, was it burning down the building? That helped. But the protest surely helped, right? Because they didn't want to, they didn't want to prosecute those guys. So what was going on was not no conflict. The mother got on and said, listen, let's do what we need to do to bring attention to the fact they killed my son. That's what she was saying, rather than attention to the fact that you're destroying the cop car. Because the press is going to say, oh, they destroyed the cop. Well, why? Well, 5 paragraphs down, oh, Dante Wright got killed. The people need to really understand that. There was no conflict in that sense. The mother and the family were saying, hey, now sometimes it's true, because I saw it happen in Texas. There's a famous case in Texas where this kid was killed and their parents came out and said they didn't want any protests. You remember that? Really, that was really kind of wild. So I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that at all. What happened, I'm suggesting that we always organize so we can organize a fight back that makes sense. I'm down.
I just think that I think that I hear what you're saying. I think that my initial reaction though is that I don't think the response of the community should have. I don't know that I think that the immediacy of the victim's case should take precedence over the righteous anger of the community. Well, and that's where I think I've always understood Daruba's point when he was saying that's why the victims' families are not supposed to be the spokespeople for the community in a response to their victimization. So I hear your point about the tactic. I'm just saying, anyway.
Well, let's explore it honestly. Okay, let's explore the community. No, the vast majority of people there wanted to protest. They wanted to do it in a militant and disciplined manner. They didn't want to throw rocks at the cops because they wanted the world to know that they killed this brother. So when we talk about this, let's be honest. There was only a few guys running around saying, okay, and nobody stopped them. They destroyed the cop cars. Nobody stopped them. I want you to understand what's going on. Some people go and running. No, people let folks who wanted to attack, who wanted to throw bottles, nobody stopped them, brother. I want you to be clear about that, right? We could have counted the people who threw a bottle on one hand. Right? The vast majority of people that came out, and there were hundreds, right? They wanted to organize. They wanted to rally and make sure that we demanded that this woman go to jail. That was the first order of business. Demanded, no, we ain't trying to hear it. We want this cop. And the vast majority, 99.9% of the crowd, 99% of the crowd, that's what they were there for. All right. And they began to organize. That's why I got up and spoke even. They said, hey, somebody get on the mic. And we started chanting and we began to organize and we began to demand that woman, we didn't even know who it was. We didn't care that they be put in jail. That was the instinct of the crowd, brother. That's what people wanted to do. So, I don't want to create no false scenario. There were some young folks.
No, I'm not. And that's not even the distinction I'm looking to draw because the clip I was seeing, it wasn't a debate between, peaceful, nonviolent protest and violent uprising. It was a loud crowd, seemingly not violent, not, creating chaos, just loud. And it seemed like the parents, Wright's parents, were basically trying to tell the crowd all of their comments were addressing the handful of people you're talking about. And it seemed like it felt like it was also being spread to everybody. And they didn't seem directed at a handful of people. The comments seemed to be directed at the whole crowd, as if to say everybody needs to chill. And
Once you took the
anyway.
mic, so obviously you're going to be the microphone. So, and then people heard that and they respected it. So, but to the other point about the families and them being victims, well, then they're if you get victimized, doesn't necessarily make you a victim. I mean, you can be, you're still a victim because you got victimized. You can still fight back. And so, to his point, some families are fighting. I remember that family in Texas. I can't remember that family's killing, and they were like, "Hey, we don't want to fight back." Well, I disagree with them. You know what I'm saying? If I'd have been in town, I was like, "Look, we got to fight." Now, the vast majority of these families, my brother, want to fight back. And so, to your point, sometimes we don't want them to do it by themselves. We want to do it together. Here, what we do is, like when we had the Mother's March in last June, right? We brought families together. We had a big march on that Sunday where we brought the community, activists, everybody out to support these people who had lost their loved ones. And we had raised the demand to reopen the cases now. All right. And of course, our third demand is that we end the system of policing. So that's not no reform demand, if you notice. And the families are backing that. It's a pretty revolutionary demand in the system of policing as we know it now. That's pretty clear. And so the folks we're working with, that's where they're coming from. They agree with the idea of reopening the case. Every time the police get killed, they demand that the police be prosecuted. And they work with any and everybody, all right, to push forward the case. So families can, because we're living proof. We do it here. You just saw Tashira Garraway, right? She comes to every protest. She organizes protests. She gets behind what they organized Dante Wright's family right away. And she helped get Dante Wright and George Floyd's family together. You see how much more powerful that is? And that's just not them. They are out front and there are activists right there with them. If you see the press conference, we're right there with them, demanding justice. We're working together. The families can work to fight for justice for their loved one. I've seen them do it. So, but I understand that some people can be off, and I'm not talking about the folks that are off, like that family or two. There's been a family or two that said, "Oh, we don't want people to protest on it." I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the folks that want to fight. There's people who've been fighting for years, right? Right in your neck of the woods. Sister Tawanda Jones has been fighting for her brother for a long time, right? And been consistent about it. You familiar with West Wednesday? She has the broadcast, yeah.
So, I am, and I'm also familiar with the unfortunate relationship my institution has to that case. Whether it's Morgan State's police and even at one point there was a one moment. I have to check the details on this, but it was a couple years ago where I believe my beloved institution denied space for some protests around that as well. So I have to double check that. But if I remember correctly, my institution hasn't always had the best relationship, unfortunately, to that sister struggle. So anyway, I just wanted to quickly point that out. Mel, before I get to I have a pressing question for you that is admittedly the most serious one you may have not been asked yet. So I just want you to brace yourself for that. And that's coming in just a minute. But in advance of that, I did want you to, since your last visit to with us at least, if there's anything pressing related to Dante Wright or Derek Chauvin or to George Floyd, that has happened in the last couple of days, or that you think we need to be focused on? Is there is there an issue slipping through the cracks here? Is there something with the trial maybe that we're not paying enough attention to, or the way the trial is being covered that we're not paying enough attention to? Is there anything we need to?
Well, we tried to update it. I'm trying to get free so I can kind of write a few pieces about this thing, because I wanted to explore what we talked about earlier, why it's so important to rally around the families and so important to raise the demands of prosecution and reopening the case, and also that we end the system so we can stop playing this game about good cops, bad cops, black cops being better. But the trial, wrapped up, and they're going to do closing arguments. Now, what's interesting, and I'm trying to put it all together, is so much. So stay with me. And I know there's some themes that, remember I said a long time ago, and people actually quoted me, that this trial was going to have the system of policing was going to be on trial. And if you notice, in the defense, I thought it was going to really, be honest with you, I thought it was going to have more of a negative impact, or use that word, traumatizing impact on the community than it did. I think that Dante Wright actually took away from some of it. But, if people done sat there and heard him say that, if you would have nodded hit it, what he did was his job. Remember, the cop got up there, that real redneck looking cop got up there and said that, he did what he was paid to do.
Mm.
And that whole knee or the neck, that's cop procedure. And so that came out too. So, that's why the brass, the upper level management was trying to throw him under the bus, because they knew that was coming. That actually that's what he was taught to do. You see, they're trying to distance themselves from it. But the cops are taught to do that knee thing.
And he was also a trainer of cops to do that.
Yes. And so they were right. This is what cops do. This was no aberration. So in other words, if they put a knee on your neck and they killed the kid, they killed the guy in Antioch, was it Angelo Quinto, the same way. They killed Anton Black the same way. They killed several people the same way with the knee on the neck. This is not a new thing, right? And this is a technique that the police have been using. So why they put a knee on the neck? It winds up hurting people. Elijah McCain, the same thing, right? And they're trained to do these crazy holes to people. And that's what came out in trial. So yes, so Derek Chauvin was doing what police are trained to do. That came out. Also what was revealed, I think was interesting, is that whole thing, I told people this is true, that if you say you can't breathe, they're going to choke you. If you are literally not being able to breathe and the cops got you down and you say you can't breathe, you are in trouble, because they are taught in their academy, it came out, that if you can breathe, if you can talk, you can breathe. It came out in court.
And then they also said, to your point last time you were with us, that that's not only a proof that they, according to them, that you can breathe, but that you're resisting arrest.
Well, in the court, that one crazy guy got on the stand and said, well, him saying I can't breathe was a passive. I wrote about a passive form of resistance. It's like, man, get out of here with your crazy self. You know what I'm saying? I don't have no problem calling these people there. You're an animal. Get off the stand. What animal is going to get up there talking about me saying I can't breathe? Where you get that from? You stop pretending to be a human being.
And and medical doctors have actually been coming out over the last year or since last summer and saying that that's factually incorrect. That in fact, when you say I can't breathe, that is the body's like. It's like almost like an involuntary reflex that your body is calling out for help, because it's saying this is it. My last effort here is to tell you I can't breathe. That's how desperate it is. So they're saying even medically to claim that when you say you can't breathe, that's proof that you can is factually incorrect.
Well, brother, it goes deeper than that. See, all this policing goes to, remember, the reason police exist anyway, to keep us in our place. We're an oppressed nationality. Remember, we can talk real on this show. We're an oppressed nationality in this country, right? And so they built up a whole mythology, right, to reinforce that. So one of them is that we're superhuman. And so it's not possible that we can't breathe, because we're human. Right. What do you mean you can't breathe? What do you mean, Negro, you can't breathe? Yeah, you can breathe underwater, I'm sure. We can hold you down for 10 minutes. I bet you still can breathe. You know what I'm saying? So, they treat us as if we're animals. They're animals, but they treat us, and they got this lexicon. And speaking of, so now part of the lexicon is this excited delirium thing. And these medical examiners, these forensic pathologists are cop supporters. And so they're supposed to be a group of, they're supposed to be governed by medicine, but they're not. They're governed by the need to oppress Black people. That's what motivates them. A lot of them, I can only guess that they must be a real racist organization, because out of clear blue, they come up with this, because it's a new thing. It only came into the lexicon in like 85. Nobody recognizes this excited delirium. The psychiatrist, it's not in a DSM manual. The American Medical Association does not recognize it. The only people who recognize it is their little cop-oriented group, the medical examiners of the U.S. I can't think of the name of. There's no such thing. And you've seen I wish I had notes in front of me. They walked through it in court. In fact, because the prosecution wanted to make sure that the defense couldn't use it, and they did such a good job, defense didn't bring it back anymore. But one of the things was people being agitated, sweating a lot. Folks are taking off their clothes. People taking off their clothes is a sign they're having some mental struggles, right? And superhuman strength was one of them. And what this came about was during the crack epidemic, and cops were beating people down who were high, but they used this as an excuse to kill people. They were killing a lot of folks who were on
and I know around, certainly in the 80s and 90s, I don't know to what extent it still goes on, but in and around DC, PCP was a big excuse for that too. That brothers in particular get all boated out and have that superhuman strength and require, obviously extra levels of force. But so yeah, that's.
Yeah,
anyway.
it was an excuse to kill folks. They excited to learn. Y'all can look it up. It's not real. It's quackery. It's not real medicine. The other thing that was interesting that came out was, and this messed up. This hurt the defense a little bit. So did you notice they brought on this guy, Dr. David Fowler, from your neck of the woods? He's the Maryland. He was the Maryland medical examiner, right? They see how smooth the press is. The press keeps saying he retired. He did not retire. He resigned because he was sued. He resigned because they caught up with him. The families of Anton Black and Brother West and all those other families in Maryland caught up with him, that him and his cronies continued to diagnose people's bodies, give coroner reports, autopsy reports, supporting the police. They were lying. First, they wouldn't even give people the autopsy report until months later. And then they kept saying when people were dying because they were asphyxiated to death, they died from asphyxiation. He kept saying, well, they were dying from heart disease or heart attack and that kind of stuff. In other words, Black folks have a high degree of hypertension, high blood pressure. And so what he really is saying, I said, that these people are dying because they was Negroes and they was going to die anyway. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm going to put it in blunt terms because that's where they're going. And this guy was from South Africa, y'all. So this guy, his formative years were in South Africa. Yeah, he didn't leave South Africa to 91. My guess is he left in 91 because that's when they were getting ready, to turn power over to the Black African, South African majority. This cat is probably, I can't find anywhere.
And look at that. If I'm not mistaken, if my timeline is right, he probably got out before they killed Chris Hani, which was the meant to be a symbol of making South Africa great again or safe for white folks again. So that's probably why he probably dipped out and missed the moment.
That's true.
Anyway, but that's deep though. I didn't know. I wasn't following the trial. I haven't been following the trial carefully enough to know that he was involved or that he had this connection. His background being in South Africa.
The Maryland ACLU, look it up. They sued him because the family of I just mentioned his sister's name, Anton Black.
Black, yeah.
Yes. You remember the murder of Anton Black was similar to the murder of George Floyd, and the coroner said, the medical examiner said he died of a heart attack or something like to that effect. And then he said, here's a kicker. So there's 5 causes of death, right? Homicide, suicide, and I can't think what the other 2, but anyway. And then the 5th one is undetermined. And so when they use undetermined, it makes it hard for you to press your case because the medical examiner saying, well, it's undetermined, so we can't charge somebody with a homicide. But yeah, so he is sued by the Maryland ACLU.
In fact, I'm pulling it up here. Their statement from the other day, the Maryland ACLU comment on former Maryland medical examiner defending police killings. Under Dr. Fowler's leadership, the Maryland Office of Medical Examiner has been complicit in creating the false narratives about what kills Black people in police encounters, including Tyrone West, Tawan Boyd, Anton Black, and too many others. The medical examiner's office ruled that Anton Black's death was not a homicide, even though video showed police chase him, tase him, and pin him face down to the ground after he was handcuffed, and at which point he stopped breathing. The medical examiner blamed Anton for his own death, peppering its report with false claims about laced drugs, a heart condition, and even Anton's bipolar disorder, instead of the police who killed him. The family was forced to pay for outside experts to help to understand what really killed Anton. And I'll put the link to this in the description of this video, but that's a pretty damning statement. Never mind that he had already been previously, that's a pretty damning statement anyway.
And this is the defense's star witness, a racist Africana. And to your point, he left in 91. They let Mandela out at 90, and they let him out in 91. I mean, he left in 91 when a lot of the white South Africans saw the handwriting on the wall. So yeah.
And then let me check that. Didn't they kill Chris Hani in because I know they killed Chris Hani to pave the way for Mandela's version of post-apartheid. Because Yeah, right. He was killed April 10th, 1993. So we just actually passed the anniversary. We should actually do some tribute to Chris Hani on this platform, given that he is among my favorites. Right. So he got out because while Chris Hani was still there, whites knew that Mandela being free or not, if Chris Hani is still running around, the Black Revolution is not over. So the Fowler family probably got out of there beforehand and missed that their moment.
You give him too much credit. He was running from Mandela too, brother. They running from anybody black led anything. I agree with you on the Hani thing, but you give him too much credit. He was even the most conservative black led government. He didn't want no part of, brother. So my guess is so you give him too much. They was leaving because they know whoever's gonna be leaving, so there's gonna be some black folks, and they want no part of it. So there was a whole.
But Mel, I missed this though because so how did this come up how did Fowler's presence play out in the trial? Was he brought up by Chauvin's defense, or was he? And even knowing that this man had his track record in Maryland, so did the prosecution have a field day with that? They must have loved that then, right? The cross-examination must have been hot.
Well, you know how you I think on the show before you see me write it down too. And then other interviews I say to people, they say, "Well, can Derek Chauvin get a fair trial in this atmosphere?" I said, "Listen, Derek Chauvin's going to get a fair trial than me and you ever would, right? Because when they put you on trial, they bring back everything you did. That time you took a cord out of your mama's purse. That time you took a candy bar at the store." You know what I'm saying? At time, I'll be facetious, but they bring up your entire.
I was funny. I was saying how accurate you were describing my youth. I was like, damn, Mel.
And so they bring up everything. You know what I'm saying? That time you broke that girl's heart. But everything. They bring it all back. And so if you notice in this trial, it's fascinating. They couldn't bring up Derek Chauvin's brutal and animalistic history. I got to say this because I like doing this. I admit, Derek Chauvin is an animal, right? He is an animal. He's a psychopath. Watch him in the courtroom. Watch him. If you notice, he's trying very, very hard to imitate a human being. He's trying hard to imitate a human being. That dude is one of those off guys. He's a psychopath. You see him killing George Floyd. He knows he's killing George Floyd, and he's smiling. That dude is one of those rare ones. And our conservative brothers and sisters, we talk about the training and who they pick to be cops. Man, in most major cities, they choose racist cops. They pick sociopaths and they're psychopaths. That dude, even the other cops were leery of that dude. Somebody I know said that one of the guys, somebody I know that knew some cops said that the cop that was in charge of him was always, he made him nervous. He said because there was something in his eyes that never registered. This is what a cop is saying. They said there was something in Chauvin's eyes that sent chills through his body on occasion. Yeah, this is what his commander was saying. Something in his eyes. That dude's a psychopath. But anyway, not to get off track. So the trial revealed how policing really works. That they put knees on your neck. All right, the medical examiner. To your point about the medical examiner, they brought the medical examiner in because they can't put all that background in court. And to your point about cross-examination, they weren't allowed to sully his reputation that way. They didn't need to, because the cross-examination ate him up. Because he added carbon. He said that his determination was he died. The cause of death was undetermined. The method of death, I get them mixed up. There's a method of death, cause of death. The cause of death. The method of death was undetermined. Cause of death was, get this, you just throw some stuff against the wall. Here we go. Cause of death was arrhythmia brought on by hypertension, high blood pressure, heart disease, narrowing of artery, methamphetamine, fentanyl, and he added one more, carbon monoxide. And I add this, and the fact that he was a black person. So
where does the carbon monoxide come from?
And Cross, they ate him alive with that one. They said carbon monoxide. The prosecutor asked him, "So, sir, were you aware that do you know whether the car was on or not?" "No, I did not." Whoa. So how are you going to say carbon monoxide if you know the car was on? Well, the car wasn't on.
Well, I mean, again, and if you don't have his head pinned by the exhaust pipe, I'm sure he's not going to suffer that either. I mean, damn.
That's the other point. The prosecutor, well, you know, if it was on, he would have to have help in it. Yes, I admit. So, he said a lot of.
So if I take somebody and hold their head in a gas pipe and they die, I can go to court and say I didn't do it. He died from carbon monoxide poison. I mean, that's just, yeah, that's wild right there.
Well, you got to understand, their role is, so this is why, you know, you got to have, at some point, you got to have a restructuring of the society, right? The whole structure, the whole prosecution, the office and the court, all those people work together, the prisons, all those work together to throw our behinds in jail, right? And to do bad stuff to us and allow us, because see, this is why the prosecution had to parade a whole group of experts, a pulmonologist, a cardiologist, a lung expert, a heart expert, because, and this guy ain't gonna get off, Andrew Baker, he decided to add subjectivity to his report, right? Instead of just saying, hey, the man died from X, Y, and Z. It was a weird thing anyway. Cardiopulmonary arrest complicated by law enforcement restraint. What the hell is that?
Complicated by law enforcement.
Right. Because, you know, in plain English, complicated means, it sounds like what he's saying. Of course, that's not the word it means in medical, but, and I have fun with it. I said, it sounds like he's saying that George Floyd's death was complicating the police's ability to restrain him.
That's right.
That's what it is. Like, you know, sometimes.
Yeah. Black life is complicating white supremacist, you know, self-concept.
And sometimes, so it's like a Freudian slip. Now, medically, the word complicated doesn't mean that. It meant that, just the opposite, that that he was killed by the police trying to restrain him. But the complicated in regular language means that it sounds off as
it just doesn't sound like murder.
Right. So, so in cross-examination, they ate him up, but they weren't able to bring in, you know, they got all these stringent rules. That's why I keep telling folks, you know, they put you in that little box of rules, and Chauvin has a chance if you abide by that little small box of rules. But the people in court, the pool reporters, you know, every day there's a reporter from the print and also from the broadcast media. And so they observing the jury, whatever. So based on observation, now you take this with a grain of salt. The jury wasn't quite buying it. In fact, one jury went to sleep during this guy's testimony. So the jury wasn't really buying dude's deal, especially in cross-examination, because he did something. And Jerry Blackwell said, so now you wouldn't want to trick the jury, would you? You wouldn't be trying to mislead them. No, he asked him a few times. There was something that he said that was way out to lunch. And that's, he brought up the carbon monoxide thing and also something else. So David Fowler's testimony was around the whole thing that was around saying that George Floyd died, but that nobody had, in other words, he took Derek Chauvin out of the equation. It's pretty slick stuff, but I don't know if it worked or not. I ain't in their mind, but the cross-examination made that obvious that, you know, he said the death was accidental because that's what he's used to doing. You know, that's how they're programmed. You know, that's why people have to get independent autopsy reports and that kind of stuff, because these folks are programmed, right, to justify what the police did. We had it here all the time. You know, Jamar Clark got killed and the cops lied, and, you know, the witnesses saw the cop on top of him. What is that? I like to remember these pigs' names, so they, you know, they should be famous for what they did. I can't remember. Ringwall is one of them. I can't think of the other dude's name. You can look him up. Ringwall is one. I can't think of that other dude's name. You know, they killed this guy for no reason, right? They're playing cards. You know, this case, this is our other big case here before Philando Castile. This is one I really had a lot of work around, organized around. Jamar Clark was a Friday night, and they were playing cards, and this literally like right around the corner from where I live, literally right around the corner. I mean, literally right up, like it would take me less than 2 minutes to get to where he died, walking. And so right around the corner from where I live, he was there's a little club where people kind of hang out. And he was playing cards in his house with some girlfriends and another friend. Anyway, they got the clown, and he's chasing her around the house because they started a hood rumor initially that he assaulted somebody, which was a lie. She fell and hurt her ankle, pretty much kind of broke it or something. And they called the EMS. They came in, and remember, they're drinking and playing cards, so they're all drunk and whatever. So she's in the car. They bring her out of the car, and she's in the back of the EMS, the ambulance. And she's hollering at him, and they're fussing, they're just having fun. And she's screaming, "Hey, man, you broke my ankle." Something like, so the two EMS guys like, "Oh, he must have brutalized her," right? So he's a little drunk. So he comes out and they put her in, and he's banging on the thing going, "Hey, get well," whatever, they're having fun with each other. So the two, suburban oriented white guys who felt like they're going to come to the rescue of this black woman, I guess. We still don't know why in the world they called the police, because he sure wasn't doing anything. He was banging on the window, but he was drunk. He wasn't trying to. So they interpret that he had abused her because they were joking with each other, right? So they called the cops. The precinct was right down the street. So these two clowns come up and decide what they do all the time. And they rolled up. He's a little tipsy, probably. They roll up. I shouldn't say that too much because I don't know how, but I know that, they were playing and drinking a little bit. So they decide to bully him. So the EMS is driving off, and, they say that, "Oh, the guy's keeping us from doing our job," something like that. And that's not what's going on. Next thing you know, they roll up, as I would have, it's like, "What do you want?" You know what I'm saying? "I ain't doing nothing. I haven't done anything wrong." That's how people respond. Like, "What you pushing up on me for, man? I ain't done nothing wrong." So too many black people get hurt in this scenario. They know they haven't done anything wrong, but the law is there for you to comply. Doesn't matter. Now we've intervened. You must comply. That's their role, to make you comply, because in complying with them, you're complying with the state, because they want to make sure that if you resist them, this is what you're going to face. That's what this is about psychologically. And so they roll up on him. He's resistant. Of course he is. What have I done? Right? And they bully him. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, this happened out of thin air. Nothing. Just come up on nothing. No reason to be there. And he knows it. I ain't done nothing. So they decide to bully. "Well, give us your ID. Turn around." "What am I turning around? What have I done?" So they put handcuffs on him. And I'm still convinced they put handcuffs on him because a little kid was up. He should have been in bed. But he told me, "Mr. Mel, they had handcuffs." I still believe him to this day. They put handcuffs on him. Now, there was a debate whether it's handcuffs on him or not. I believe, because a little 8-year-old told me that he saw an 8-year-old's make up stuff, but they ain't gonna make up nothing like that, right? They saw him with handcuffs on him. And they threw him on the ground, y'all, and shot this man in his head. They threw him on the ground, and they were straddling him, right? And the gun belt was jumping around. They say that he was reaching for one of his gun belt, and the other one blows his brains out. Yeah. And so witnesses said, it happened so fast. I think nobody really saw the cop pull the trigger because it happened so fast. But they did see the one cop on top of it, right? And so for whatever reason, he was on top of him. Jamar was handcuffed, so they were just doing their little normal rough up thing. And one of them decided to pull the pistol. And maybe, I don't know. I don't think he could have reached for the gun because his hand was hanging. Anyway, long story short, to make their story stick, they somehow found DNA. You can't make this up. They found DNA evidence that said that he had his hand on. How they find some DNA evidence like that, but they find DNA evidence to make their story. You should, in fact, when they asked me about it, I said it was a nice fairy tale. Because you should have heard the story they told to make up this lie to get away with killing our brother Jamar Clark. But anyway, so my point is that that's the medical examiner's office real role, right? And the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, whatever you call it, whatever in your state, whoever does the investigation, their job is to come in and investigate and clear the cop. That's what they're trying to do. And they'll do it by any means necessary. And so now they're in a weird position of having to have the medical examiner's office support their case. And he's not used to doing that. So he doesn't say that he died from asphyxiation. Right. The medical examiner here said, he died from a cardiac arrhythmia, the heart thing. And when he got on the stage, the witness stand, he never backed off of it. Right. Because that's where it comes from. So, and I could roll with him if he thought it was just a heart thing. But here's the problem I have. Right. So he has a job. Right. What is it? It's like just the facts, man, kind of job. Right. Just what happened, Jared, brother. It's like, Jared, what happened? Here are the facts. right? So like you have somebody write a paper, give me all that extraneous stuff, make your point and get in and get out, right? So why does he add this particular line that George Floyd would have died had he been sitting in his house? What the heck does that have to do with a matter? Your job is to tell us why he died and how he died, not to give any subjective opinion about what could have may have. No, your job is to look at this body, look at this man, and tell us how he died, what the method and the method of his death. That's all your job is. But he added in his report, you see, that he could have died. It's not your job. See, this is the kind of stuff they do. And that's what created the defensive argument.
Listen, unfortunately, this is not my job, and I have to go.
You gotta go, brother.
I gotta go. But if more of you become members, no, I'm just playing. I'm just playing. I got, but listen, first of all, I want to just say quickly, I love the fact that you just reached out and we jumped on and made this happen. Same thing with Brother Marco earlier this morning. I want to continue to encourage that, and I appreciate that you did that, and I want you to do that as often as we can make happen. Your reporting is essential, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much. The one important question I do have to squeeze in here before we leave that I didn't get to, this is, and I'm hoping you're braced for this, is that how can you be in Minnesota and not rocking, and you be from, be in Minnesota and you got an Air Jordan thing behind you.
That's actually not Air Jordan. It's a
who's that?
It's somebody. It's supposed to be. People keep thinking it's Jordan, but it's not Jordan. It's some. If you look at the shoes, it's actually not Air Jordan shoes. He's got some street shoes on. It's just supposed to be a black man's ability to stretch. And actually, full revelation, it's not mine. It's borrowed. So.
But it's not, okay, all right, fair enough. Because I was just wondering how in the world it wasn't Kevin Garnett. That's what I was wondering. Like, what kind of blasphemy? I was like, how could you be in Minnesota with a Jordan and not a Kevin Garnett? I was like, that is just seems like an egregious replica. Miscarriage of justice.
I got something funny to really tell you. I can't stand Michael Jordan.
All right,
you know what I'm saying? Because he was such an apolitical cat, man. I appreciate his basketball skill. Let me just say that. I'm joking. I don't have no problem with Michael Jordan, but I couldn't stand the fact, and it came out in the series, that the dude wouldn't stand up for nothing, for nobody at no time. Oh, all I'm saying is, I hear you, and I just was curious as how in the world are we talking to a brother in Minnesota and he doesn't have Kevin Garnett up there? But anyway, but thanks again, man. And anytime we can help get your reporting out, please let us know, man. Really appreciate your work, man. Thank you very much. Well, thank y'all, and let's do this again maybe next week. Different time.
Anytime.
Same station, different time.
Same station, different time. Holla, and folks just need to stay tuned to catch you when we can, man. But thank you very much, man. We'll catch you next time. Appreciate you.
Y'all. Take care now.
All right. All right, everybody. I want to thank you all again for joining us this morning. And thanks to Brother Marco. Thanks to Mel Reeves. Thanks to everybody out here in the comments and chats and who are going to see this later on. Please do hit the like button, the share button, the subscribe button. And if you can, hit the join button. Because so much is expanding here with the channel, and my joke about my job aside, your membership and whatever you can do, if not financially, through sharing, liking, viewing, encouraging others, helps expand the channel. You got the morning show coming on April 20th, 4:20, 8 a.m. Eastern. New shows coming on, new people coming on board behind the scenes. So all of the we really are demonstrating as a media outlet the kind of economy that we would need as a society, where the wealth we are all creating is being distributed to make the whole work better. Please do, please go and check the Mumia coverage we did yesterday, specifically the video I just put up this morning of the specific point of that conversation yesterday between Kalonji Changa and Bob Boyle, and essential movement history pieces right there. So please go and check that. Come back, of course, later today, 5 p.m. Eastern for Lukman Nation, 7 p.m. Eastern for the episode 11 of The Last Dope Intellectual. Again, I have seen it, and I can attest to its dopeness in advance. So you don't want to miss that. And I think it's fair to say that if you watch Lukman Nation at 5 and then Last Dope Intellectual at 7, you get a whole heavy extended dose of the Lukmans. And then after that, you get Renegade Culture at 9 o'clock Eastern, where you get not only the Renegade Culture crew, but even more of Lukman Nation and a little more of your boy Jared Ball. So a lot more coming up. And then, by the way, don't forget, tomorrow, we just added this, by the way. Tomorrow, come back at 11 o'clock Eastern, because Kalonji Changa of Renegade Culture is going to sit down with us here at I Mix What I Like, because and give us an exclusive interview about him, which is, I think, going to be revealing and really important, actually, because the version of Kalonji that people may get, on this channel and through his show, who may not be as familiar with the movement work, it's an important version, but it's not all to the brother that there is. And some of the stuff he's been involved with and the work he's been involved in supporting is really legendary stuff. So we're going to talk about that with him at length tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Eastern, right here at I Mix What I Like live on Black Power Media, and much more coming up, going on beyond that. So stick around, definitely show your support and love for the station and the channel. And as my man Pierre from Comedy Hype says, if you got more that we haven't gotten to, and if you got something later on, make sure you
put it in the comments.
And as Fred Hampton used to say to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody. Catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like live, everybody. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.